Interdimensional War by Dagaan Galacticos. Chapter 10. The only danger I had encountered in the astral so far had been the amoebas from the bar that had followed me home that night. They had clung to me because they sensed my fear and lack of control, and I think simply because I didn't have a clue as to how to shield myself from them. I didn't know at that time that I could have made a reflective silver aura and would have been invisible to such parasites. Or I could have visualized a hot branding iron in the shape of a star, or visualized a mega-powered cattle prod and poked them with it, and they would have skedaddled away. Where we were going now required a serious level of focus because we would encounter real predators, psychic reptilian beings surrounded by intelligent armed psychic guards actively searching for intruders. The Adric psychic police are disincarnate psychocephalosauri and velociraptors able to travel between the Draco, fourth dimension of Krual, and both Ovvalan and Earth's astral zones. Besides the Adric to contend with, there would be the human bats. These were the human covert operatives hidden within the various intelligence agencies of the shadow governments of Earth, run by reptilian-possessed humans. The bats used drugs to go into a trance from where they did remote psychic viewing of things happening in both physical realms and astral space. Most important political leaders, industrial executives, and media CEOs on Earth had bats guards monitoring the space around them, particularly in sleep. This was the kind of information the Blue Stone transmission had catalogued in my mind. In his first book, Monroe had written about an experience he had with a remote viewer. Monroe was a successful businessman who traveled a lot in the course of promoting his radio stations. On one such trip, he had flown into Nantucket and, tired from the flight, had taken a nap in his hotel. As often happened to him when he was sleeping, he spontaneously left his body and found himself walking on a lawn in the sunshine around a Nantucket house. Suddenly, a physical man appeared pointing a gun at him. This so frightened Monroe that he was jolted back to his body in the hotel room and woke up. Sitting up and thinking about it, he realized that then President Kennedy was expected to fly into Nantucket for the start of a vacation. This, he figured, was the house where Kennedy was staying, and it had an armed psychic guard patrolling the grounds. The implications of this were staggering. Silvaan had conveyed to me in a short, intense communication relay the vicious nature of the Draco's soul and the endlessly deceptive nature of the Andrka, sorcerers. No lie or misrepresentation was too extreme or silly for them to use in either physical reality or astral space. He impressed on me one main idea: the intensity with which the Adric pursued someone outside their own kind was beyond an inexperienced mind to grasp. It wasn't that they hated us or saw us as their enemy, he'd said. To them, we were prey. We were like rebellious cattle that have broken through the fence. We are their steaks. After scaring me half to death with this warning, he then emphasized this: especially don't generate fear or you will attract them. Right. At the end of this exchange, Silvaan had gripped my forearm and I his in the Siddhe expression of brotherhood. I was moved to feel we were genuinely allies. How can I describe my feelings at this point? When I'm in the OBE state, there is a timeless sense as though this has always been happening and is completely normal. It's like when you're dreaming and the most fantastical things are happening to you. You drive a bus up a brick wall and find yourself holding a goldfish while lying in a baby carriage, and it's all in the flow. But now I was feeling an increasing sense of rationalism in the OBE state and a sense of firmness in the images as people and places appeared again and again, so that the experience has become both an abstract dream and a heart-stoppingly intense reality at the same time. Now was added the sense of malevolence and danger. Isult and Luev had a brief but intense exchange during the Bluestone transmission in which a similar urgency and evasion techniques were relayed to her. All these thoughts ran through our minds as Luev and I followed energy lines over the night landscape. Under clear skies pulsing with stars, we passed over a desert-like land with rolling hills and weather-beaten cliffs, with specific directions to follow this valley, then that line of mountains. We came to a deep canyon that we were to descend to a river and then follow this upstream. At a certain rock formation, we were to ascend vertically and head south a few 100 feet. Dagaan, Isult, Silvaan, Oorden, and others of the high-ranking Siddhe were following us protectively, cloaked and at a distance. At various locations, we were to stop and send out awareness signals to see if anyone sensed alien watchers. This was a kind of mental sonar, a blip of awareness you sent out and then listened to see if it bounced off anything in any peculiar way. Going along like this, we came to the entry point. This was simply a flat desert plain covered with small trees. There was nothing there out of the ordinary. Sandy soil and a few little rocks and some spindly plants were all I saw. As instructed, Luev and I embraced and focused on love and on our child-to-be, this mysterious Ea. Though I felt an intense presence below me, I concentrated on clearing all extraneous thought from my mind as we let ourselves feel love. We placed shields of opaque, deflective silver light around ourselves and hovered very still, and then, very slowly, descended into the ground. We passed through sand and then sandstone, and then suddenly into a huge, rounded vault. A luminous glow that seemed to come out of the sandstone walls lit up the cavern. Concentrating on not projecting our presence, we glided slowly toward where the ceiling and wall met. This was to be our lookout. The murmur of hundreds of voices rose from the floor of the cavern about the size of a large auditorium. Men and women, both human and Ovvalan, were speaking urgently to one another in groups. A growling undertone of aggression vibrated throughout the vault. Though the cut of their clothes was uniquely tailored to each person, all wore oversized robes of either red or black. Some of the robes had high peaked collars reaching up above the head. Others had wide lapels. All had flared, flowing oriental sleeves. Enclosing the center of the chamber floor was a circular band, 50 feet across, made of white crisscrosses. Inside this band was a second inner band of glistening red. Inside this was a third band made of glittering crystal sand about a yard wide. In the very center of these concentric bands, there was a sparkling golden triangle. On the ground around the triangle of gold dust, there were strange, unearthly symbols drawn in gold and brilliant red. Every few yards around the outer perimeter were what looked like water troughs or planters. The mass of people stood at arm's length from one another in groups a little distant out from the perimeter. Their keeping a distance from the edge of the circle showed a definite respect for the powers at play, because these people were themselves radiating a tremendous dark churning force. The feeling was one of suppressed and imminent menace. They were speaking to one another in a business-like way, but all the while a tremendous impatience was in the air, controlled only by severe discipline. As the moments passed, the set of circles began vibrating with a pulsing suction, and I knew that magical forces were coming alive. Luev and I held hands and beamed waves of urgency and information to one another, where we hovered, motionless and tight against the angle of the ceiling. "Maintain a reflective cover," she would beam me. "Stay close," I would beam back. We had been instructed to do this. We looked at the assembly below, registering what Isult had told us, that this was most of the Underka hierarchy. Humans possessed by Draco entities in human and Ovvalan bodies, entities who had once been living Tyrannosaurus rexes and Psychophalosauri, now possessing the minds and bodies of humans and Ovvalans from ancient, carefully bred lineages of power. There were aides to these Draco chiefs numbering in the hundreds of thousands, but these were most of the operating chieftains now on Earth. These beings were in willful opposition to cosmic order and dedicated to the control of human and Ovvalan evolution and possession of the planet. Rogue souls. I was starting to feel sick with the horror and wonder of it. These were the CEOs, overtly and covertly, of government agencies and vast corporate enterprises. They controlled economic systems, communication systems, industrial, manufacturing, and transportation systems. They operated commercial slave systems, international drug operations, gambling conglomerates, weapons factories. Some were the heads of states or countries. They ran and owned sports complexes, universities, real estate, and investment operations. They controlled massive industrial farming operations, pharmaceutical conglomerates, and global retail chains. They operated a secret intelligence system and covert military groups. These were the powers behind the powers. The great majority were from the old Underka royal families and had been raised learning Ouroboros sorcery skills and had been linked from birth through university educations and socializations to other Underka families. The one code of conduct they shared in common was a predatory competition with one another for the subjugation of humanity and Ovvalans. Their only allegiance was to the Draco master plan of full spectrum dominance and access to a power known as vril, predatory creativity. And all of this was skillfully camouflaged from the people of the world by the perfected use of the Ouroboros linguistic, by which they said one thing and meant another. Astrally, this environment was radiating dark pulses of electricity where the atoms were at some distance from one another, a rough elemental electrical discharge that purposefully resisted the finer points of intelligence in favor of an aggressive elemental force. In contrast to this, Luev and I amplified the presence of the warmth and love-filled mysterious life growing inside of us, the wonder of our meeting, our alliance with universal forces. These things below us, these possessed people, were the current incarnation of the leaders who had fought with the Siddhe for 7,000 years. They were the core powers that create senseless wars and ethnic conflicts. To these beings, our baby was just a Cheerio. In the most ghoulish way imaginable, I was completely fascinated. The intelligence within these beings was not for life. Life, the solar blood, as Dagaan had called it, was missing here. There was no glow to any of them. They were like black holes pulling light inwards. We had been instructed above all to be prepared to zero in on our physical bodies should we be challenged or even witnessed. We couldn't allow the strange forces we were experiencing to distract us from the fact that right now the Adric and the bats were invisibly and continuously scanning every inch of the area, looking for foreign radiations. An Ovvalan or human astral spy would have been sensed in seconds, but our unique energy constructs seemed to be so far beyond their perceptions because nothing was coming near us. We were just air in the room. I looked at some of the individuals, resisting the impulse to get magnetized by their power, by tightening my hold around Luev's hips. There were Ovvalans and humans of every race and color down there. I looked at a tall oriental man dressed in a floor-length black robe of some fine, rich, flowing material that shimmered opalescent in the glowing cavern light. His face was chiseled, intelligent, and commanding. A tension of focused will and dangerously intense passion reverberated in his energy field. As I looked at him, he blinked once, then twice, and then quickly turned his head, scanning the room to left, to right, sensing my intrusion and ready to bite somebody. I looked away. I looked at another man, this one a black Ovvalan, dressed in blood-red robes. I saw his cheek twitch in awareness of something touching him. I quickly looked away. These people were hyper-aware. The Oriental Ovvalan in black appeared to be using a tremendous amount of raw willpower to hold a state of passionate violence toward the other people directly around him under control. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. There was distinctly 1 arm's length of space between each person. I realized that a lot of mental energy was going into making sure no one got any closer. It was as though each person here could barely stand the presence of the others. They tolerated each other for the sake of the common purpose in their meeting. Taking quick glimpses and then looking away, I studied the Ovvalan black man. His cheeks were lean, his face long, his ears peaked, his forehead high, and his eyes bright with awareness and glittering curiosity. His robes concealed a body loaded with athletic strength and skill. As I watched him, his gaze shifted within himself, and I could feel him begin to scan from within what it was that had made him watchful. I quickly shifted my gaze away, and as instructed, placed a silver star shield between him and me, inscribed with a certain banishing design I had been shown, a snap visualization. I then caressed the curve of Luev's waist beneath her robe to shift my focus. Her still taut, flat belly radiated feline animal strength that soothed me. I squeezed myself against her. There was a warm security in our touch. We made up a dream bubble from within which we watched these strange, menacing creatures. A very beautiful blonde human woman dressed in red and with a wide lapelled collar that rose into a point behind her back had the same cold, glittering reptilian eyes as those around her, and the intensely contained will. Her face was a frozen mask of beauty and cold, detached refinement. Ageless, proud, and impatient for the proceedings to begin, she squirmed in place. There was one man, dressed in red, in his mid-40s, to whom people deferred. He seemed to have 2 bodyguards. A quick glance showed me something odd about him. He was deathly calm. His eyes were wide open, his stance relaxed, and his skin, though healthy, seemed waxed and fixed in place. I wanted to look at him more, but Luev zapped me with a caution, "Stay focused. Maintain the visualizations." So I stopped looking at him and concentrated on our job. Quickly scanning from face to face, I saw in each person an extraordinary individuality and definition, and in each face a power and will, an intelligence and refinement like I had never seen before. These were men and women who thought very highly of themselves and brooked no interference even from persons just like themselves. These were superior people, itching to fight for the next mark of distinction. I saw a number of human faces I actually recognized, names omitted as per publishing contract. A senator, a famous real estate magnate, a famous aging lawyer, a television newscaster, a computer mogul, an aging male movie star, next to a famous model who was young and beautiful and hungry. A murmur of voices arose as very tall men, giants, dressed in elegant dark tailored suits, entered bearing silver trays loaded with tall fluted wine glasses. Lusty laughter rose as these waiters entered the throng of people, and the tension momentarily lifted as people removed glasses from the trays. I thought naturally it was wine, but then I watched a woman carefully as she drank from her glass. Her lips seemed to writhe around the rim of the glass as she swallowed the whole of the contents in one breathless gulp. Immediately her energy field quivered, shook, and expanded with intense vitality. Her skin began to glow with health, vitality, and beauty. A clear, circular globe of bright garnet light expanded around her. She turned toward the center of the circled triangle and became intensely still. One after another of the people drank down in one gulp what I realized was fresh blood and became entranced. Turning toward the center, the entire mass of people spread around the edge of the circle. Complete silence fell. The intensity of focused will I had seen in each of these individuals was as nothing compared to what took place after they had drunk their cups of blood. Their auras joined together into one focused ray of luminous dark will. The giants returned in sets of two, each carrying large canvas sacks suspended between polished brass poles. As they circulated through the crowd, everyone carelessly threw their glasses into the bags where they smashed faintly. The giants disappeared through a doorway, and shortly after that, 6 of the giants returned surrounding 4 even larger muscular giants who carried a golden cage atop a platform by thick brass carrying poles balanced on their shoulders. In the cage, seated in an ornate golden chair, was a human woman with long blonde hair. She was dressed in a reflecting gold hooded floor-length robe with violet piping around the hem and along the arms. Her energy field was completely different from everyone else in the room. She radiated organic human warmth and vulnerability, and as the cage was carried through the crowd, I could see a warm, honey-hued force around her that physically drew the Dracos toward her. Golden honey ripples of vibrating mammalian warmth radiated outwards from her like sunbeams. Under the black and red robes, the Draco-possessed forms jerked and heaved spasmodically as the cage passed near them. One man actually reached between the bars to pet the woman, at which point one of the giants turned with lightning speed and struck him with a silver rod he carried. A blue-white electrical charge arced against his arm, setting his robe on fire. With equal speed, the man ripped off the sleeve and threw it to the ground and stomped the flame out, grunted once, and then resumed his silent trance. There was no reaction at all from the people surrounding him. A rumbling groan arose out of the assembly as the procession with the cage crossed the red and white bands and lowered the platform to the ground. Total silence then took over the crowd. The woman climbed out of the golden cage. I heard the hinges squeal distantly as she pushed open the door and stepped down onto the triangle of gold dust. The woman was tall and full-bodied. Her golden robes covered all her skin from her ankles to her ears. She even wore golden sandals. She quickly stepped inside the golden triangle with an obvious urgency. She stood alone, looking upwards to avoid looking into the eyes of any of the silent assembly, clasped her hands in front of herself, and waited. At that point, her escort of giants took positions around the perimeter, their silver cattle prods held erect. There were a few moments of silence, and then the other giants in black suits came rushing out of the door in the wall, carrying what looked like red 5-gallon gasoline jugs. They poured the contents of the jugs into the troughs inside the crisscross bands. This was a red viscous liquid that I realized with growing horror was fresh blood in glass containers. A thrilling, jewel-like energy expanded inwards and upwards from the blood. The entire assembly shuddered and moaned. The deathly still man now crossed from the outside of the bands to stand next to the woman. He was holding a long black wand, and in a voice far more powerful than I expected to hear, he intoned, "Hecas, hecas, eberstre bibeloios." An invisible presence entered the chamber that felt like a compressed and mounting pressure. Luev squeezed my hand with 3 rapid motions. "Hold the constructs. Don't get spaced out. Stay close." The thought forms followed the hand squeezes. I looked at Luev and saw she was enclosed in her white psychic robes, a high collar tight around her throat, the material thick and protective. I saw that I was dressed similarly, but in an electric blue material. The energy in the room was becoming frighteningly dark and magnetic. She wrapped her arms around my waist and squeezed her belly against me. The sorcerer waved his wand through the honeyed aura of the woman dressed in gold and drew projected geometrical figures on the top of the cavern from their combined energy. This took on the shape of a portal. He surrounded this portal with letters and geometrical shapes that turned blood red and hung suspended, fading in brilliance but remaining visible. Once this drawing had been placed on the ceiling of the chamber, the man with the wand abruptly walked back into the crowd. It came to me that he was one of the original 14 magicians who had allowed a Tyrannosaurian lord to take over his mind 7,000 years ago. The priestess raised her arms and let her robes fall away so that except for a gold bikini bottom, she stood naked. She had very large stick-out breasts from which clouds of milky vapor wafted out and upwards. Golden energy pulsed from between the woman's legs and breasts and spiraled up inside the golden triangle to the ceiling of the vault without leaving the boundaries of the triangle beneath her feet. Vertical planes of energy coming off her flesh carried the golden energy to the ceiling and glowed in a triangular column of honey light. A silent sigh came out of the assembly at the sight of the golden energy as of something precious and adored. It was very beautiful. In contrast to the fertile living energy of the priestess, the collective energy of the assembly looked like a shredded black sailcloth blowing in a winter wind. A craven, sucking hunger lusted for the energy inside the golden triangle. Serrated energies emanated from the assembly and compressed into a vacuum. Hunger and lust from the assembly began pulling against the vertical golden triangle, pulling down at whatever was beyond the top of the brilliant column of sunlight standing in a pressure-filled, dark-lit chamber. Weird black serrated energy lines lurched aggressively downwards towards the woman, but stopped at the vertical plane around the golden triangle, leaving her untouched. A growling hum grew out of the assembly as the black jagged lines and the golden energy seemed to battle one another. The priestess now stated invocations that were repeated by the assembly. A kind of life-sucking thunder was contained in this groaning, moaning chant coming from the group. It was the sound of pure, undiluted lust and greed. The priestess was transfixed, looking directly upwards as the golden warm energy surrounding her began to pulse. Her mind seemed to become vacant as the energy rose up and met thunderous serrated waves of dark energy ripping into the astral portal. The two opposing energies grew in intensity until suddenly from the center of the ceiling vault, an energy crack appeared and a black and red mixed ectoplasm oozed down along the outside of the golden triangle. It was thick and flowing like red oil or black blood. It began filling the entire vault with a dark, pungent odor, a thrilling, violent anti-energy. It was like nothing I can compare it to. It was like a hunger for destruction and lust and rage, finally balanced inside a piercing intelligence, thrilling, terrifying, possessing. This was the Draco vril, anti-energy, I had been warned to expect. The assembly began to growl and masticate and thrash their heads spasmodically from side to side as the energy descended. Their bodies swelled and filled their robes, and snouts began to protrude from their faces as their skin became like leather and turned a greenish hue. Luev squeezed me tighter, and I squeezed her back just as tightly. I seriously wondered at that point if we shouldn't get the hell out of there, as it felt like all control by everybody was about to get lost. "Focus," Luev hissed through clenched teeth, in a strange mix of rage and sadness, love and determination. I heard a high-pitched tone ring in my ears and felt a fevered awareness, but still remembered to scan the air around us for Adric or bats, but could see nothing. The vril energy spilled down the outside edge of the golden triangle, then down onto the floor like blood-laced molasses as dark green-scaled reptilian legs appeared dropping down from the energy crack at the ceiling. Huge, tight bands of muscle quivering with life and power descended. Muscles, scales, claws. Then a torso of rippling muscles, incredibly alive, powerful, different than any physical flesh I've ever seen. Like a huge snake with each of its muscles quivering independently. Thick, muscular arms with little delicate paws and long clawed fingers solidified out of the ectoplasmic smoke. Sharper and sharper, this came into defined reality through the waves of energy rising up from the troughs of blood and the golden glow from the naked woman. The reptilian skin, shining, dense, snake-rippling. Then the head appeared, part human, part Ovvalan, all reptile. Jaws of protruding bone and muscle, ears like horns, huge eyes with luminous, pale green reptilian irises and blacker than black, vertically slit incandescent pupils out of which came the final evil black light. All the energies in the room had been leading to this culmination, a crisis of energy, in the waves of dark intelligence coming from those eyes. Right then and there, I had no doubt where the ideas of satanic evil had come from. It was this thing. 3 stories tall, weighing tons, its weight settled athletically down on its haunches. Then, with shocking finality, the long spine, muscular tail dropped down out of the heights, sliding viciously down the wall of vertical golden light. With a sickening wet thwack, like a massive evil afterbirth, it slammed onto the floor and slowly writhed. The reptilian towered 20 feet above the heads of the assembly. The massive head turned with quick reptilian jerks and looked over the people. Its huge, unblinking green reptilian eyes with their black light pupils scanned the crowd as it slowly turned in a full circle. The assembly, their heads tilted up, looked back with abandoned adoration. The thing's jaw muscles bunched and protruded as it masticated slowly with dense, electrically rippling muscles. Brilliant white pointed teeth showed behind the leathery lips as the head quivered with restrained violence. Tyrannosaurus Rex, with the intelligent face of a man. It looked around the room, unblinking, with unquestionable defiance, lust, rage, and mastery. I had never seen something so powerful and in control. I felt pulled towards it, my thoughts reversing themselves inside my mind. I couldn't help feeling an intense admiration and awe. "Rexon!" a deep, gravelly voice yelled passionately, and then everyone in the assembly began screaming the name over and over and over. "Rexon! Rexon! Rexon! Rexon!" A cold, thundering voice exploded out of the massive reptilian. "They're burning the blood of our ancestors in their cars!" Rexon's voice effortlessly filled the cavern with a subsonic thunder and drowned out all the other combined voices. The clarity of its pronunciation, with a slight upper-crust English accent, was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. 60 million years we have waited for this day, it said. More screams of Rexon! 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 We cannot fail now, the being said. Delirious shouts of enthusiasm echoed in the cavern. Figures advanced from outside the circle of the group, carrying some kind of cylinders, but my attention was fixed on the being. The Arctic, Arabia, Venezuela, the ocean floor. We will possess that blood of our ancestral soul. Silence grew among the raging throng as it spoke. We must increase the global industrial consumption to 25 times what it is today. In India, China, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, South America, Africa, and all the rest of the untouched markets awaiting activation. We will build auto plants, atomic energy plants, supermalls in the Congo, Siberia, Machu Picchu. No market must go unexploited. We will have not mere fields of genetically improved soy and corn, but entire plains. And these new hybrid grains will be the size of gorilla testicles. They will be harvested with 50-wheel combines that will house 1,000 live-in workers and convey boxed, canned product directly into moving semis instantly en route to feed the poor, huddled, hungry masses, who will pay for it with cash money. Hysterical laughter catapulted out of the assembly. Snapping his rows of pointed teeth for silence, Rexon continued. As his talking grew more intense, thick, gleaming, pearly slime began dribbling from his jaws and down his chest onto the floor. The unified global economy must subvert the growing environmental regulations that are limiting our uses of free market industrial processes. These processes were created with our blood. We are oil. Oil is us. Gak, 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 gak. The reptilian let out a low, menacing laugh. The people screamed approval. We must create the atmosphere for a faster consumerism. We must teach their young our value system. Ouroboros, eat or be eaten. They need to think of themselves as bigger and badder. Bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger bank accounts, bigger appetites. There is an environmental crisis. Why? Because of the so-called minimum wage. The minimum wage is ruining venture capital and must be abolished. We will introduce the microwave. Enraptured screams, shout of delirious approval. The pissant wage. Only a loser would accept such wages to begin with. And environmentalists. Environmentalists must be understood as the enemies of progress. People the world over must see them as the devils they are, preventing a mother from feeding her babies, a real man from buying his wife what she desires. A teenager must see environmentalists as inferior and impoverished and sexless losers. It is this damned environmental caution that is holding us up with their girly economics. We must make the populations of Earth and Ovvala more receptive to our new world order. They need to feel the urgency we ourselves feel. In Aranskala and in the United States, the national debt is almost beyond control. But not quite. We still have time. We still have credit. Screams of lustful joy. The tenor of the voice changed to a low, methodical drone and ground like a diesel truck above the intensifying silence. The thundering voice boomed off the walls of the chamber to rapt attention. Today, I will reveal to you two important things. The first is this. The amount of oil left in the ground of the planet has, as we suspected, passed the peak oil stage. From now on, the extraction and processing of oil will become more and more expensive. The oil burned in ships and trucks to transport oil will itself be more and more expensive. The oil burned by industry to make steel, plastic, clothes, computers will be more expensive. The oil to heat the homes of the tax-paying cattle will be more expensive as there is less and cruder oil. We are in the bottom half of the barrel now, and profit will amortize against us. As profits grow less, we must cut excess spending to the bone. The crowd gasped. A deep, uncertain hiss passed through the crowd. Social Security, retirement accounts, savings accounts, long-term stocks and credit default swap extensions, mortgage holding companies, all that passive capital needs to be returned to circulation to generate more cash. We will have to reduce profits and salaries at the bottom and at the top. I know. I've always said more is better, and it is. But now is the time to fully shift the global economy into our possession. Your taking less is only temporary, and will stimulate the profit margin as the value of oil goes down, and stabilize the economy so that we can lure the new cash economies in India and China into credit dependence. Then we expand unilaterally to its subsidiaries on every continent, island, and isthmus, on Terra and Iluva. The crowd seemed to mutter hopefully. Cheers seemed to arise muffled behind their voices. The assembly swayed dreamily on its feet, stunned to silence, as the reptile continued. When the new, extended global infrastructure is in place, then, bam, raise prices. Yes, but this is nothing to what I am about to tell you. Global warming, industrial pollution of the skies, water, and land, 1/3 of industrial society on antidepressants, all of this points to one thing. This planet is exhausted. It cannot produce even a 20 or even a 15% profit for us for even another decade. Startled cries of protest began to be heard. Cries of real pain arose. 7 to 12%, that's it. It's as much as you can expect, and that's with the tax-free offshore accounts. So, what would you say if I gave you a new planet? Rexon's voice boomed off the cavern walls, actually making the robes of the people in front of him flap. An intensifying hiss, sounding like the ocean gathering into a large wave, began a long, deep, sucking sound that more and more filled the chamber as the wheels in the minds of the predators computed the levels of profit possible from an entire new planet. When the sucking sound was complete, the assembly looked up at Rexon with the shining eyes of a choir of boys and girls facing the heavenly host. A perfect silence held as the towering reptilian turned slowly in place, a little grin lifting the corners of its mouth. Its long, muscular tail quivered happily behind it as it minced in tightly controlled steps inside the perimeter of the magical bands. Its massive weight heaved elastically from foot to foot, its head lowered and thrust forward, the jaws and muscles working slowly under the green scales, the eyes flashing their black luminosity into the eyes of each and every individual there. People's mouths were literally hanging open in wonder. Unconsciously, I had separated from Luev, only faintly aware that she was desperately calling me back. I hovered over to the center of the chamber and stood in midair at eye level with Rexon, looking at the beautiful green-gold scales arranged in fascinating geometrical designs around his eyes and along his snout. For 55 million years now, the High Draco Council of Overlords has been in partnership with the Enochian Armada, the ancient and homeless nomads from Nibiru in Udran sector of the galaxy. They exhausted their biosphere and their planet died. Boo-hoo. 9,000 years ago, they began living in life support systems and have been traveling in an armada of spacecraft through deep space looking for a tenable biosphere where they could land and live. They want to stop now. They want Earth. But what will they pay for it? Quizzical sounds came out of the crowd as the voice continued. Ananokians are supreme masters of clone engineering, as demonstrated by their creation of the Greys, their highly intelligent and technologically proficient replications. For 40 years, the abductions squads have been gathering genetic material in Sala and Chevy Chase, Ularan and Bel Air, Moscow, Tokyo, and all those other hotshot cities. We have accumulated quite a library of genetic material from the best human and Ovvalan bloodlines, from the aggressors. In exchange for this planet, Ananokians will grow clones with that genetic material for us to inhabit. Henceforth, there will be no need to displace some human soul with sloppy habits, for these bodies are virgins. No one ever lived them. No one ever lived in them. A gasp of disbelief hissed through the chamber as people absorbed this new line. Thrilled staccato screeches came from a few individuals who seemed to intuit what Rexon was about to reveal. We have blood drives in Palm Beach, El Balel, Okota, Berlin, Paris and Beijing, Santa Barbara, Dubai, Sao Paulo, Ocello, and Bangkok. Going now. We will have a warehouse of bodies to possess, play with, eat, and then just jump in another body. A continuous supply of young blood. The crowd hummed in wonder. Under our instructions, the Ananokians have placed their laboratory mothership in deep space orbit behind the moon to avoid human and Ovvalan observation. There will be no need to capture living people and keep them alive until we need hosts, as we have to now. This will save tremendously on overhead expenses. And be assured that I get the 20% transaction fee for selling the planet, so don't dick me around. We will happily let the Ananokians have the Earth, because we... At this point, I was so caught up in the suspense that I pissed in my robe. Are going... The silence was deafening. To Mars! After a moment's stunned silence, the assembly began screaming wildly, and I too laughed at what seemed the incredible genius of his plan, as the T-Rex possessed bodies below me howled and slapped each other on their arms and backs. The reptile laughed. But listen! We must hurry! Rexon roared, and silence fell. Already, the Arctic ice is melting faster than we anticipated. Within 10 years, it will be entirely liquefied. The Martian probes sent up 6 years ago have landed intact and are laying the foundations for the huts where the first colonists will live and work. And the president, yes, Aragoncolon, has been re-elected, and Prince Kakabakadaka, my own brother, who now stands this close to the throne of power. Rexon held two curved and glistening claws together, which elicited cheers. He has announced the goal of reviving the space program as a major global priority. This dream must be sold with the greatest aggression we can generate, because it will take $1 quadrillion US to establish the Martian colonies. We will build ships and load them with thousands of humans and Ovvalans who will believe they are going to colonize the new planet, but of course they will be our meat and our drink, our support, our sport, our caddies, and ultimately the compost that will fertilize the soil of our new home, just as our ancestors fertilized the soil of this planet. And we will need fertile soil on Mars, because the Ananokians have a second cloning assignment from us. The final payment for the Nookies will be to revive the ecosystem of our ancestors. We will bring to life, wait for it, the Jurassic. I couldn't even breathe. Yes, our Jurassic homeland in its entirety will be revived again. All the plants, all the minor edible species that were our living food. We will walk like kings once more. This isn't Jurassic Park. This is Juracilius Paradise. Gok, 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 gok. The reptile reptile lost himself in laughter. The assembly was delirious with love now, swaying, hugs and arm-waving everywhere. Silence! A quadrillion bucks isn't just going to fall in our laps. We will have to work for it. Humans and Ovvalans only rise to real productivity when there is war. Until now, we have been content to pit nation against nation to direct such productivity, but this entails too much loss of infrastructure. What we need is an enemy common to all humans and Ovvalans, an extraterrestrial enemy. The Ananokians have their own library of intergalactic genetic cloning material from abductions and recombination experiments. In exchange for our allowing them to abduct a quota of humans and to harvest water from the ocean, they are growing these extraterrestrial clones for us to display to humans and Ovvalans. These clones will be displayed in Ovvala in crashed helicopters and on Earth in disposable anti-gravity discs to create the impression of an extraterrestrial invasion. We need to move very fast from this point, or this will all remain but a dream. You are to drive humans and Ovvalans to the necessary level of productivity with the news of an extraterrestrial invasion immediately. Flyovers must begin tomorrow, even though the clones won't be ready for a few months. We will soon broadcast from every satellite that the invasion is based on the Red Planet, and that we must set up a military position on the moon from which to defend Earth. It will be revealed that Mars is the Dead Sea Scrolls' secret code name for heaven. When people learn that it is being taken over by evil extraterrestrials, they will see that we have no choice but to bomb heaven to get it back. We will raise people to a level of terror they have never imagined, and harness that energy for a productivity and consumerism never conceived in the history of the Milky Way. Rexon! 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 Glassy-eyed, the mob of reptilians chanted as one voice. In my trance, I saw the sense of this. Human evolution was taking too long. The teeming masses of the uneducated and unmotivated poor all over the world were just a massive burden holding back the accomplishment of a true excellence and realization of the only real democracy possible, a democracy of owners, of masters. I myself could play a part in this. Images of prefabricated gazebos and garages, fencing and ornamental tool sheds of my design, manufactured cheaply in China and Brazil for sale in super Walmarts all around the world, and on the internet flashed through my mind. I could have a Georgian mansion in Georgia and a castle in Spain. I could drive up to skyscrapers in Thailand, travel between airports in a limo with Victoria's angels dressed in confetti and gossamer tripping over themselves to press their curving bodies against me. I could also go to Mars and landscape the new developments. Sun City Mars. I could help colonize space for the true kings of Earth and be among those elect of the human Ovvalan elite. Rexon's voice woke me up from this dream. Across the entire surface of Mars, in the clearings between forests of Jurassic greenery, where our prey will be reproducing, there will be fairways and greens, meteor hole sand traps and mesas for teeing off. You can join me in the darndest game of golf you ever saw. We could play our way from continent to continent, eating our caddies. For Rexon yelled, the sound of his voice echoing off the walls of the chamber. He screamed this last word, and the entire assembly echoed it like angels, singing from another world, as everyone, myself included, gazed adoringly at Rexon, lizard number one. Tall men in robes had advanced through the group carrying shiny red jugs, which they now poured into the vats standing around the periphery of the circle. When the giants kicked over the vats, I saw they were full of raw petroleum, and that what they had added was congealing blood. Oil and blood. That's what it was, oil and blood. The Tyrannosaur began roaring, his reptilian snout snapping its teeth. It threw itself on the ground and flung itself around wildly, licking the oil and blood off its little childlike arms. It licked the ground. One of the giants was too slow stepping away from the perimeter, and Rexon's lightning jaws lunged out and crunched down around him. The head and a leg fell off and slid into the crowd. He tossed the remaining carcass into the mass of shouting, cheering reptilians, knocking over about 20 of them, who began licking the dead giant's blood off their clothes. The priestess had frozen in a trance inside the gold triangle. She stared vertically up, wide-eyed with terror, naked and drained of energy. She slumped, quivering, trying not to make eye contact with the maddened reptilian people. 4 giants, dressed in red, surrounded her. One of them threw her golden robe around her and roughly stuffed her into the golden cage. Locking her in, the giants advanced through the crowd with their shock wands extended. They carried the cage through the hundreds of screaming Draco vampires, moving as quickly as they could, as the priestess drunkenly clutched the golden bars in an exhausted stupor. "Rexon! Rexon! Rexon!" the crowd screamed in a frenzy of renewed lust and greed. "For!" others yelled. Both females and males with semi-human reptilian faces leaped at the golden cage as it passed them, held high on the shoulders of the giants, their faces distorted with fanatical, haunted eyes. The reptilians licked the bars of the cage with incredibly long tongues and were electrocuted by the weapons of the guards and just laughed at their seared arms and legs and burning robes. "Juo! Juo!" I faintly and uncomprehendingly heard Luev's cries behind me. At this point, the vibrations were overwhelming. Suddenly, Rexon stood on his massive haunches, oil and blood dripping off his magnificent body, blood, saliva, and oil dripping out of his open jaws. He stood to his full height, vibrating with vitality and power. Thrusting his snout forwards, he screamed a long, howling Tyrannosaurian scream as he looked right into my eyes. "Juo! Turn around! Turn around, Juo!" Luev's voice was cracking with the effort of getting my attention. Quicker than thought, the monster leaned forward and raked my chest with its claws, slicing my robe open and throwing me back against the wall. Rexon squatted down on his haunches and with an ear-splitting scream leaped up and vanished beyond the top of the golden triangle in a bone-jarring clap of thunder. I was pierced to the heart and immobilized, suspended against the ceiling in midair over the hundreds of wild, screaming, Draco-possessed bodies who were looking up to see what had happened. I dimly felt Luev jerk my arm and pull me up through the layers of sandstone into the silent desert night as she pleaded with me to respond. "Home, Juo! Home, Juo!" Dagaan and Isult, Silvaan and Oorden emerged out of the cloaked hiding and sped me down into the massive darkened canyon as Adric and Bat's operatives closed in pursuit. Desperately, I tried to clear my head. As if from a long distance, I saw the faces of Dagaan, Silvaan, and Oorden reaching out to me, calling me, surrounding me as we sped through the air. Dark silhouettes emerged from the space beyond. Spider-like tentacles whipped out and tried to snare my astral body. I saw Silvaan shoot white light out of his palm at one of these tentacled shadows, and then Dagaan and Oorden were shooting razor-sharp planes of light outwards at shadow beings as we flew up a narrow side canyon, trying to hide behind mesa-like stone formations. I couldn't track everything that was happening. We accelerated up into the night sky. We continued jetting up and away in an arc, dematerializing until we were in a realm of atomic particles, which began to blur for me as we traveled at inconceivable speeds, at which point I blacked out. When I came out of it, I was in Luev's arms, on the floor of the hallway in the caverns of Logana. Blue, ink-like fluid was spilling out of my chest. It was all over Luev's clothes. Her face was swollen with crying. I was paralyzed and freezing. All my heat had been sucked out by the slash across my chest. The psychic robes around Luev were so thick I could barely feel her body. We lay in a clutching embrace on the rug where we had landed on coming out of the deep space. Wounded Siddhe warriors with gashes on their bodies were gasping for air and were being attended to on either side of me. Down the hall I saw Dagaan and Isult with their heads close together, looking at me sadly. A rosy love coming out of Luev slowly penetrated me, and the other miracle, us, our encounter, our love, the life growing within her, took over, and from deep within the core of me, a glowing, vibrant radiance began to expand outwards, pushing back the cold and dark presence. Kayla, Elsinad, and Ovvala came up and knelt beside Luev around me and placed their hands on my body. The glowing rose light began to pulse inside all of us as they huddled over me on the carpet, and I felt the fearful shard of darkness pulled out of the gash in my chest by a tremendous love intelligence that hovered above us. Then life and love radiated into my heart from these warrior soul friends, and I sobbed helplessly. "It's her," Luev said. I looked at her through my streaming tears, puzzled by what she meant. "It's Ea." Tears of love spilled down her cheeks and mingled with my own as I began to understand. A serene purity of love was vibrating in intense waves out of Luev's belly into my heart, even as I felt the blood pumping out of my chest in great liquid spurts. When I awoke in Yvonne's bed, it was early winter sunset. I'd slept all day. A phosphorescent rosy glow illumined the apartment. I looked out the bedroom window and saw the Sangre de Cristo mountains, bathed in the forgiving rosy sweetness of that otherworldly light. I lay in bed alone in the silence of the apartment. The pillow was wet with the tears that were still in my eyes. I was overwhelmed by the images still streaming through my mind. Love, terror, and the black light in the heart of the Draco beast, Rexon. I felt totally strange being in Yvonne's house. My heart felt like it was crushed. I wanted to be home as quickly as possible. I stumbled into my clothes. As I walked out the front door, I saw the yellow stickets with Yvonne's writing about taking out the trash, asking me to be sure and make the bed, put the dishes in the machine, and asking me to take the videos back and to not forget about going to the office party on Tuesday. I was in a fog. I couldn't relate to any of it as I lurched down the stairs to my truck. Once outside the building, the rosy glow surrounded me, and I felt the moon waves of love radiating out of Luev's belly and the healing hands of the Siddhe women touching my chest. As I walked across the parking lot, Rexon's head momentarily flashed alive in front of me, completely real. The head turned toward me, snapping its jaws together. The huge reptilian eyes, full of hate and venom, looked straight into mine. I fell against my truck. My heart convulsed. A flash of deep pain seared across my chest where the claws had raked me. It made me double over. I couldn't handle any more horror. My mind shut down. I drove like a zombie. Get home. Sleep. Get home. Sleep.